Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Stratford City Council meeting. We'll begin this evening's meeting with a moment of silent reflection. I'll turn the meeting over to the clerk now.
Through you, Your Worship. Item 2 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations? And if so, please state the general nature thereof.
Seeing none.
Item 3 is adoption of the minutes, and there is a motion that the minutes of the regular meeting of council of the Corporation of the City of Stratford, dated January 24th, be adopted as printed.
Moved by Councillor Beattie and seconded by Councillor Ingram. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Item 4 is adoption of the addendum, and prior to today's meeting, 2 addendums were circulated. The first being to the Planning and Heritage Committee, and that was to add receipt of correspondence to item 4.1 on that agenda. And the second being for the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee agenda to add receipt of correspondence and a delegation to item 6.1. And there is a motion that the addendums to the regular agenda of council and standing committees dated February 14th to add the items just noted be added to the agenda as printed.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos and seconded by Councillor Burback. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 5 is report of the Committee of the Whole in camera session, and item 5.1 at the February 2nd session under the Municipal Act as amended, a matter concerning the following item was considered. And that was item 3.1, good governance, education and training session. And under the exemption of a meeting of a council or local board or of a committee of either of them may be closed to the public if the following conditions are both satisfied. The first being that the meeting is held for the purpose of educating or training the members. And the second, at the meeting, no member discusses or otherwise deals with any matter in a way that materially advances the business or decision-making of the council. And as the purpose of the in-camera session was to provide education and training, no direction was given. Item 5.2, at the February 9th session under the Municipal Act as amended, a matter concerning the following item was considered, and that was 3.1, closed meetings, education and training session, again held under the meeting of a council or local board may be closed to the public if the following conditions are satisfied. Again, the meeting is held for the purpose of educating or training the members. And 2, at the meeting, no member discusses or otherwise deals with any matter that materially advances the business or decision-making of council. And as the purpose of the in-camera session was to provide education and training, no direction was given. So move to item 5.3, the February 14th Committee of the Whole in-camera session was canceled. Item 6 is hearings of deputations and presentations. And item 6.1 is a presentation by KPMG regarding the update on business process review facilities data collection strategy. And there is a motion that the presentation by Bruce Peaver, lead engagement partner, and Sana Malik, project manager, on behalf of KPMG be heard.
Moved by Councillor Bunting and seconded by Councillor Ingram. The delegation be heard. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Your Worship, this is Bruce Peaver.
Good evening, Bruce. How are you?
Good, thank you, Your Worship. Pleasure to see you again.
Good to see you too. I'll turn the floor over to you, my friend.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm pleased tonight, Your Worship, Council and staff to be virtually presenting our final report on the business process review for facilities and data collection. We were engaged by the city to perform a business process review to identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges, and to generate actionable recommendations for data collection that your staff can integrate into their daily work life with facilities. The work was conducted such that we had 4 principles in mind. The first was that the knowledge and expertise of city staff would be fully engaged and built upon to arrive at recommended actions through a transparent, participative, and inclusive process facilitated by us. The second principle was that it would be conducted in a way that engaged city employees. Third principle was to, whenever possible, transfer knowledge and necessary tools to city staff to enable them to better develop their own solutions. And finally, the framework and approach would be based on leading practices from other municipalities, other levels of government, or the private sector. So those were the 4 principles under which we delivered the project. If we turn the page, you can see here that we began work in November, early November, and we completed at the beginning of February. The work involved 4 phases of work: project initiation and planning, current state analysis, the identification of opportunities, and the preparation of recommendations, and now the final report and presentation to council. So with that, what I'm going to do is turn it over to my colleague, Sana Malik, and Sana is going to walk you through the recommendations that have come out of the report. Sana?
Sure. Thank you, Bruce, and good evening, everybody. If you go to the next slide. So after the completion of this project, we identified 16 observations and data collection strategy recommendations, which I'll walk you through in the next couple of slides. Before I begin, I just want to point out that we noted that the city does have systems in place that are currently tracking data points. However, further system configurations are required to improve data accuracy, completeness, and relevance. So moving on to the recommendations. The first recommendation we had is around work orders. During our review, we found that the process for maintaining work orders is manual and inconsistent across the organization. Hence, our recommendation is to extend the internal work order tracking process across all departments until a software solution is adopted in the short term. In the long term, we're recommending the city to implement a module within citywide PSD, that is a software used by the city, to manage the internal and external work orders. Our next recommendation is around facility maintenance and capital expenditures. We noted that the managers in the organization might not necessarily have the tools they need to make operational routine decisions. Hence, the recommendation is to grant managers access to the management reporter tool to analyze spend versus budget, and also to perform software configurations to improve the quality, accuracy, and categorization of financial data. The next category we have is for utilization. What we noted from our review was that the city tracks all the utilization data of their facilities in a system called Perfect Mind. And while this is a very useful tool, it is not necessarily tracking utilization data in a meaningful way that will allow the city to make strategic decisions about their facility use. So what we're recommending is to perform software configurations to improve the quality, accuracy, and categorization of utilization data. If you go to the next slide. Our next observation is around governance. We observed during our review that our recommendation is for the town to consider the appropriate staff members to own and oversee the KPMG reporting tool, including populating it with updated data. So basically what we did was we developed a tool that consolidates all the data that the city needs to update along the way. What we noted was that the city has the data which needs to be updated and cleansed, but there's not a clear or unclear guidance on who should be tracking and maintaining that data. In the long term, what we're recommending is to centralize facility maintenance, custodial work, and capital planning in one department, with one director responsible for the portfolio of all facilities. And a last recommendation is around service delivery, which is more forward-looking. And the recommendation is to consider the disposition of underutilized and less functional facilities using our reporting tool and other system reports after implementing the data collection strategy recommendations that are contained within our report. That's the end of the slide deck. And I just want to thank you to all the staff members who were engaged in our process of supporting us in this review.
Thank you. I'll now open up the floor for questions from members of council. All right. Ms. Thompson, as CAO, do you have any overriding comments you'd like to make? You're on mute, please, Joan.
Thank you. Yes, so through you, Your Worship, I do want to thank KPMG for their work and their leadership in this particular project. We were able to achieve clear results, and we're looking forward to implementing them. And I'm looking forward to working with CLT to move this forward as part of our service delivery review and identifying where we can find additional efficiencies within the system and to consolidate and provide better data on our facilities. So those are my remarks, Your Worship.
Thank you. There's a recommendation on page 3. Is there anyone willing to move that? Councillor Vasilakos, and a seconder is Councillor Gaffney. Discussion. Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Seven.
Yeah, apologies. Something did come to me while Ms. Thompson was speaking. So if I'm correct, is that part of this exercise is taking all of the data that we have and integrating it into a single place. But my assumption would be that there would be some kind of a system put in place for sort of a hierarchy of data that would be usable by different departments, and access to that data would be done in like user access will vary across the corporation depending on who needs that data. Is this the idea like of a centralized integrated data like portal or place, but that then access will be contingent on who needs the data and which data is needed by each person?
I see Ms. Kruger, the acting director of corporate services, is come on the screen. Would you be best answered, or Ms. Thompson?
Thank
Or is
you,
our
through
consultant?
your chair. I can speak briefly about it, but I just wanted to kind of comment that the data that we're trying to capture has to do with the facilities themselves and what, not just the utilization, but any kind of tracking that's required for the maintenance of the facilities, that sort of stuff. I think it's just an evolution of the tracking that we already do. Did that help?
It does. And so does this link into the asset management plan and then also strategic planning as well? Like I'm trying to think of long-term how this tool gets used both by, let's say, council and its decision-making around budgets, but then also by staff in terms of asset management.
I think I should defer to someone else to answer the question. Councillor Vasilakos, thank you.
Through you, Your Worship. So in the previous service delivery review that was undertaken, we did not have sufficient data to try to identify where there are efficiencies with respect to our facilities. As Council is aware, our current facilities are decentralized and the management is by department. So we believe that there are efficiencies by bringing all of the facilities together into one area. But we needed the data, which we do not have a complete picture. So this new tool that we have is going to allow us and give us the direction that we need to collect all of that data. And then once we have a year of the data collection, then we can begin to start to analyze it and see where there are efficiencies. Council will be able to see usage and the expenses related to it. It does tie into asset management because some of our aging facilities, we will then have more information than what we have now to make some strategic decisions as to that particular facility and whether we continue with it, revamp it, or whatever decisions council wishes to make. But at this point, we don't have all of the data to make those types of recommendations to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Seven, I saw your hand.
Yes, thank you. I just had a question about the full-time position that's noted. Will that be brought to council in the future as part of the unfunded budget implications or as part of the 2023 budget? Or I just wanted some more information about that.
Through your worship. So the position there, it will require council approval, but until we have the data and have had a chance to analyze it, we don't know if that will be a new position or repurposed at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? I believe we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation contained on page 3. With regards to this, that we approve the business process review facilities data collection strategy and that we forward it on for council consideration prior to implementation. Is there anything further on that? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Peaver, Ms. Malik. Greatly appreciate your assistance.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Have a good night.
Next item, Madam Clerk.
Through you, your worship. Item 6.2 is a presentation by the United Way Perth Huron, and there is a motion that the presentation by Ryan Erb, Executive Director, and Elizabeth Cooper, Community Development Manager, on behalf of the United Way Perth Huron be heard.
Mover is Councillor Henderson and Councillor Ingram. Mr. Erb and Ms. Cooper be heard. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. Your worship, we're grateful to have the opportunity to be here tonight with you. As we begin, I'm looking forward to sharing our presentation to our clerk. Are you sharing the presentation we've sent to you, or will I share mine? You're sharing. Okay, thank you. Elizabeth Cooper has joined me. Some of you may know that she joined Team United Way just a few months ago to help our work in the community. We're grateful that she has joined us. She is known to many of you, I'm sure. Someone who we are very thankful is a part of our organization going forward. The United Way, as I think most of you know, is your local, 100% local charity that's working on some of the most difficult issues that we face as a society. And we're thankful for the partnership that we have with the City of Stratford, with many employees, with many people across the city who are generous to the work of the United Way. Together, we certainly participate in what we talk about as showing local love. Next slide, please. United Way, of course, as I mentioned, is focused on the social issues of our day. We call these the unignorable issues, and currently we are spending a lot of our time and energy on poverty, homelessness, mental health, domestic violence, hunger, and isolation. We spend our time on these issues in several different ways. Our organization not only raises money and funds organizations that are working to either end these social issues or mitigate these social issues, we also spend significant amounts of time trying to work at community development to change the situation in the first place. Research that provides answers and data for us to recommend for how organizations can move forward. We are also thankful that we have the opportunity to work together with many partners to achieve those goals. Next slide, please.
And this one's mine. I have the fun slide. We want to thank a huge standing ovation to the city and its employees for your contribution this year to our campaign, $53,963. This goes towards helping over 37,000 people across here in Perth, and it helped over 10,000 people right here in Stratford. We also helped an additional 7,000 people with some pandemic relief dollars. We also have some great news. After a generous workplace matching campaign, we jumped 10% in basically one day. So from 83%, we went to 93% in one day. So we get to light another light bulb in our thermometer downtown. So very good news on the United Way campaign front. Thanks to the city and staff. Next slide. Of course, staff can't do this without a support of dedicated volunteers, and our Stratford and Area Community Committee is chaired by your Martin Ritzma. So thank you, Martin, for your time and talent leading this committee. It's a brand new committee. And so all these people have come on brand new. We have Chris Shore, Marion DeWeaver, Rebecca Cunningham Dunlop, Tim Veal, Marilyn Holmes, Linda Dench, Bonnie Richardson, Becky Blows. Oh, we've got Chris there twice. And we have a new committee member that's going to be starting next month as well. So I'm very excited to have this amazing team of volunteers that has our back. Next slide. Our urgent need funds is one of the many funds that we raise money for. So this year we helped 184 local residents to access these dollars. And then they're designed to help residents in time of crisis. So they need to pay their rent right away. They don't have the money. They need groceries. Their kid has to go to the dentist. So they can apply to access these funds. And now they'll be accessible through our 211. So you call 211 and an operator will put you through to a navigator who will assess their needs, and they will either put them in touch with support that they may need, or start the application process to access these funds supported by United Way. Next slide.
And just before I begin talking about the Connection Center and Stratford Connections, I'll just mention thank you to the Social Services Department, who deserve a lot of praise for their partnership with us with the Urgent Needs Fund. So the United Way, up until recently, had simply been supplying those funds, and Social Services had been directing them to individuals in need, and that had been in place since about 3 weeks into the pandemic. We were thrilled that we were able to form that partnership in a short period of time. As the program continues, we will continue that partnership with the front door being through 211, but still Social Services has committed at least for the next year to be able to provide the resources directly to clients within the city. So that partnership is certainly appreciated. So heading into this year, one of the challenges, of course, that our city has been facing and doing tremendous work from the leadership of our Social Services Department around homelessness. But we knew that there were some gaps, some challenges. And so we were working together with many partners over the summer months to see if we could help with the situation further. And in correspondence with social services and a number of different organizations in town, including Choices for Change and others, we discussed the notion of creating something that we're now calling Stratford Connections. And at the time, we were recognizing that there was a growing need for people who were living unsheltered in our community to access basic needs services, things like laundry, washrooms, food, showers, and so forth. And that was driven by also a desire to make sure that persons who are experiencing homelessness in our community can have access to services more readily in a centralized location, and helping them on their journey, we hope, to finding permanent housing. And what happens in Stratford Connections has become quite a beautiful thing in just a couple of months that it's been opened. You know, many people are receiving direct service there, being helped with the pieces we already mentioned, but they're also being reconnected to services. They're also making maybe small steps, but steps nonetheless towards permanent housing, which is, and of course, the intention of the program. And so we're really excited about the way that this has happened. Well over 25 unique individuals have been using the service since it was opened by Choices for Change in late December, and many have made repeat visits almost on a daily basis as the service is open from 12 to 5 p.m. At the St. Paul's United Church or Anglican Church rather. We're really grateful for that partnership with the church, and also everyone who's listed here who is co-funding the project or participating in a significant way, led by our friends at Choices for Change. The community outpouring of generosity, both financially through the campaign and also through things like sharing coats and mitts and hats and very practical items, has been nothing short of phenomenal. Catherine Hardman from Choices for Change has said she has said she's never seen or participated in such a community response before, but I think we all know how generous Stratford is as a city, and so we're grateful that we can progress with this particular project together. Next slide, please. On the spectrum of housing and homelessness, one of the new projects that a number of you have been introduced to through our work over the last year and a half to research how we could potentially work at increasing housing starts, affordable housing starts in our community, has led us to the point where the United Way has agreed, its board has agreed to incubate a new program called the Community Renewal Company. The idea here is that we are going to work at building capital projects. This is going to take a long time. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have hired our first director who has experience with building and operating not-for-profit housing in Atlantic Canada, has arrived just in January to begin with us, Mr. Mitchell Rhodes. He'll be publicly introduced to the city shortly. We are very grateful, though, that we have tremendous support from the community, from all kinds of people who been participating in the various steps of the process along the way to ensure that this particular initiative will be successful. And so the Community Renewal Company, you'll hear much more about it in the coming months. But we do hope we will be able to work with many partners to create additional affording housing units alongside all the work that happens through the Consolidated Social Services Manager and Social Services Department. Next slide, please.
Coming up on February 26th is coldest night of the year, and many of you are on a team already. I have to say that the Stratford Slip Sliders, with Graham Bunting as the team captain, have raised $10K already. Mayor Dan has raised $4K of that. And you are number 24 across the country. So there's 4,600 teams across the country. The Stratford Slip Sliders are number 24. Woo! Awesome, awesome, awesome work. It's our biggest fundraiser, supporting ShelterLink and the Connection Center. And our goal is to have 90 teams. And as of today, we have 60. But we've raised about 73% of our goal that we want to raise this year. We want to raise $126,000. So we're at about 73%. So that is coming up February 26th. All hands on deck, where it's all across the region, with Stratford being the largest section of walkers drawn from that. So way to go, guys. Well done. Next slide.
And so just quickly, as we wrap up, a few reminders to the general public watching tonight and all members of council and staff. Our Social Research and Planning Council continues to share reports about various issues with recommendations. Most recently, we published a major report on mental health, basic income, a minor report on basic income, and a minor report on supportive housing. Tremendously important issues, and we encourage everyone to read those reports that are on our website. Next slide, please. Further, we're just about to release information about the future of housing. So a number of folks have gathered with data from the region to consolidate it. It does paint the picture of challenges that many people are facing. And of course, people who already are challenged with income levels to afford housing, and others across the spectrum. I'm sure you'll find this very important information to help the city with decisions in the future. Next slide, please. Again, just to say thank you so much to the community for our support that we get from our living wage partners. And I think Elizabeth is going to give a shout out to a few of them.
That's right. Yeah, we facilitate employers to get certified. And it's, so, as you can see there, $17.95 is the current Perth Huron living wage. And we have some recent employers that have become certified. So we've got Home and Company, the Bruce Hotel, Destination Stratford, Farm and Company, AccuMetal, Campout Trailers, the list goes on. So those are just the recent ones that we've been facilitating to get them as a living wage employer. So this ensures long-term prosperity and a real skilled and healthy workforce.
Thank you. And just finally, as we are grateful for all the activity around living wage, I want to remind people that United Way continues to offer workshops for not-for-profit organizations and volunteers in our community. And currently there is a series happening around board governance. And so we're thankful to have our friends at V Formation, sponsored by Libro Credit Union, join us for a couple of workshops in the next little while. More information is available on our website. Finally, just a reminder that if you're looking for services, if you're not sure what services are available in the community, we do update the 211 database locally from our staff team. And we're very thankful that we have this now North America-wide service available for people to access the information that they need. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. And just a general thank you for your kindness and support.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you, Elizabeth. Any questions for our presenters this evening? If not, I want to congratulate you both on the fine work you're doing in the community. And I know on behalf of the Slip Sliders, we plan on staying on top of the fundraising pyramid for Stratford. And we wish the Stratford Unity team all the best at trying to get even close to us as they work to catch up from a very large deficit that they're in. So we'll see you on the 26th.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thanks everyone.
Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, item 7 is orders of the day, and item 7.1 is a resolution regarding a request to allow for a minor variance application for 1041 Erie Street. And there is a staff recommendation that Mike L. Deebs be permitted to submit a minor variance application to the Committee of Adjustment for the lands located at 1041 Erie Street.
Moved by Councillor Ingram, second by Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Councillor Henderson.
Yes, I was just wondering why it's a requirement that they have to go to the variance committee, because that's going to cost them money. Why can't, as council, we just approve it since it's just a minor variance?
Ms. Bridge, thank you very much for popping up there. I'll let you take that question.
Sure, through your worship. So council considered a zoning bylaw amendment for this site about a year ago. And that zoning bylaw amendment set a front yard setback to recognize the location of an existing building. That location, unfortunately, was incorrectly measured on the site plan used for the zoning bylaw amendment. So now the possible options to them would be to reapply for a new zoning bylaw amendment, or given the scope of what is required, it is more appropriate to have them go through the minor variance process.
All right, anything further? All right, it has been moved and seconded, I believe, Madam Clerk. If there's nothing else, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Next item.
Item 7.2 is a resolution regarding inclusion of ongoing zoning bylaw amendments into the final draft comprehensive zoning bylaw. And there's a staff recommendation that pending no appeals being filed and received, and upon coming into full force and effect, the following zoning bylaw amendment be incorporated into the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. And that's 14117 Perth line 36 as zone exception 15.4.28 and on schedule A map 2A.
Councillor Ingram moving, Councillor Seven seconding. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Item 7.3 is correspondence from the Ontario Good Roads Association. So the Good Roads Board of Directors has recommended a slate of candidates to fill current vacancies on the board. Anyone currently serving on council or employed in a full-time capacity with a Good Roads member municipality or First Nation and who wishes to contest the recommended slate may file a nomination form, which will result in an election to be held at the Good Roads Annual Conference on Tuesday, April 12th. Nominations must be received by no later than 4 p.m. Friday, February 25th, and this is for the information of council.
Thank you.
Item 7.4 is a resolution regarding the 2022 budget adoption and bylaw. And there is a staff recommendation that council approve the 2022 operating and capital budget, including the changes to the capital projects noted in the report of the Acting Director of Corporate Services dated February 14th.
Councillor Gaffney moved and seconded by Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I guess first, if I could record a request, actually, no, that's okay. Sorry, do that the next option, but I wanted to discuss the concept and sort of challenge the idea that we wouldn't be able to find qualified or good candidates for positions, most notably the coordinator of equity, inclusion, and accessibility, if they were a term employment, at least to start. I'm just bringing this up because I did notice that the Region of Waterloo is hiring for the identical position, and it is for an 18-month term contract. And so I would like to see at the very least that position start as a term position. More of the reason is that if we, 90 days, like some of these positions are, they're quite expensive, and they're, 90 days is not long enough to know if somebody is the ideal candidate for that position. And I think if we had a term for these positions when at least we're starting new positions, I don't think it holds us back from attracting exceptional candidates. I think that is, it's a hard reality out there for people trying to find jobs sometimes. And I think, a lot of people would be happy to have a position that is 18 months with the possibility for extension. So I I don't know, is it possible, I'll ask Mr. Poe through the mayor. Is it possible to make a motion for an amendment at all, or at this point?
So what it would be an amendment to the budget, which you could propose separate from the budget. So you could make a motion that the position for equity, inclusion, and diversity coordinator be term contract separate, and then you get a seconder, we can debate that. And if it carries, it would wrap into number 7.4. And if it doesn't, then it would we would just go back to 7.4.
Okay, thank you for that. So if I could make a motion that the position under the expansion request for the coordinator equity, inclusion, accessibility initiatives be 18-month term to start with possibility of extension.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seeing none. Councillor Seven, there's no seconder, so we'll go back to the original motion then. Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Anything further, Councillor Clifford?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm not going to support the budget because of tax increase. But on the other hand, I want to thank the acting director of corporate services for all her time and how it was presented and for answering all the questions, and all the other counselors for all the time they spent. And also, I'd like to thank our chair for chairing it and helping us through the process.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clifford. Councillor Henderson.
And just for everybody watching, my understanding is the final percentage is 4.94. Was there any difference noted with the changes that the addendum had?
Ms. Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're not proposing the tax rate increase at this point. We're just passing the budget, which is a 7.6% increase, including all of the amendments. The tax rate itself is subject to several other variables that are still yet to come forward to council. It's still an estimate at this point, but 4.94.
All right, thank you. Councillor Seven, I saw your hand again.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to also note that I will be opposing the budget.
Thank you very much. Anything further? Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to thank staff for all the support they give me this year. Chairing my first budget, it was quite educational and eye-opening. And I'd like to thank Councillor Clifford for all his guidance this year and help. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed, and it's carried.
3, Your Worship. Item 7.5 is correspondence regarding the draft comprehensive zoning bylaw, and there is a motion that the correspondence from the Stratford and Area Builders Association dated October 14th regarding the draft comprehensive zoning bylaw be received for information.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Clifford and second by Councillor Ingram. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried.
Item 8 is business for which previous notice has been given and there's none scheduled. So moving to item 9, reports of the standing committees. Item 9.1 is the report of the Planning and Heritage Committee, and there are 3 items listed for consideration as follows. Item 9.1.1 is the planning report modification to draft approved plan of subdivision 31T18-003, and that's for 4178 Perth Line 36. Item 9.1.2 is planning report official plan amendment OPA 01-21 and zoning bylaw amendment Z01-21, and that's for 4117 Perth Line 36. And item 9.1.3 is the final draft comprehensive zoning bylaw for the city of Stratford.
Councillor Ritzma moving, seconded by Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Councillor Seven.
Could we take 9.1.2 separately, please?
Sorry, Madam Clerk, so I'm sure about that. Which one was that, Councillor Seven?
9.1.2.
Okay, thank you. All right, So we have a mover and a seconder for 9.1.1 and 9.1.3. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It's carried. So 9.1.2 has been moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that although I don't see particular, I think the development, I don't have an opposition in principle to the development, but what I don't like is the lack of density, and that's not a fault of the developer. That I think is more of something that would fall onto our responsibility. And I think when we're developing outside, like right on the city limits where there is no existing development, I think that is where we really have potential for higher density development. And so I think we need to look at every opportunity to have higher density in situations like this. And I think that we should, I don't know what the solution would be. And I know that we had talked about this, or I had asked questions about this when it was at the meeting last time, but that is the reason that I will be opposing this.
Councillor Ingram.
Thank you. I wonder if our manager of planning might be able to speak to the principles of higher density locations and where they're more appropriate versus other spots in the city.
Through your worship, thanks for the question, Councillor Ingram. I will answer that. I would note too that this specific area where this official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment are being considered for tonight has a bit of a cap in terms of density because of physical infrastructure constraints. So there is a pumping station in that location that has a fixed capacity, and that capacity has been allocated to the surrounding lands. And that dictates the ultimate density that can be built at this time. But in terms of higher density development, generally at a high level from a land use planning perspective, you try to situate those in areas where there's existing infrastructure, existing services, existing amenities, public transit, so that it can utilize all of those things that are in place.
Thank you, Ms. Bridge. Anything further? Councillor Burbeck.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. Unfortunately, I missed the committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. So I just wanted to make a note. There was a general vegetation overview and impact assessment that report that notes that 533 trees within the subject lands are proposed to be removed. And I just flagging that for information that I'm concerned about it, and that I do know that as part of the site plan application that will be addressed, but I'm really hoping that as this land is developed, that some consideration for the existing mature trees would be important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burbeck. Anything further? It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? One opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Item 9.2 is report of the Social Services Committee, and there are 3 items listed for consideration as follows. That's item 9.2.1, information on workforce funding for childcare in early years. Item 9.2.2, 2021 homeless enumeration results, and item 9.2.3, coordinator response for those unsheltered.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson moving and Councillor Bunting seconding. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you.
Item 9.3 is the report of the Community Services Committee, and there is 1 item listed for consideration as follows. That's item 9.3.1, golf course 2022 budget and fee schedule.
Councillor Beattie moving, seconded by Councillor Vasilakos. Discussion. Councillor Burbeck.
Thank you. Yeah, at the subcommittee level, I was asking not so much about budget, but more about pesticide use, and was informed that they were looking into reduction in pesticide use. And I was wondering if there's any update on that.
Here we are, Director of Community Services, Mr. St. Louis. Over to you, please.
Yeah, through the mayor, Councillor, I don't have an update at this point, at this time, but at the next meeting, I'll bring up the subject and report back on that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Thank you.
Item 10 is notice of intent, and item 10.1 is notice of public meeting under the Development Charges Act. And Stratford City Council will hold a public meeting on Tuesday, March 1st, 2022 at 6 p.m. via Zoom to hear all interested persons with respect to the proposed development charges bylaw and background study. For more information, including to obtain a copy of the proposed development charges bylaw and background study, please visit the city's website or contact the clerk's office at clerks@stratford.ca.
Thank you.
Item 11 is reading of the bylaws, and there are 4 bylaws listed for consideration as follows. Item 11.1 is adoption of official plan amendment number 31. Item 11.2 is to amend the zoning bylaw to rezone lands known municipally as part lots 3 and 4 concession 2. Item 11.3 is adoption of the comprehensive zoning bylaw. And item 11.4 is adoption of the 2022 budget. And these bylaws can be taken collectively upon unanimous vote of council present.
Moved by Councillor Vasilakos and Councillor Ritzma that these bylaws be taken collectively. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I would like to take 11.2 and 11.4 separately, and if I could have a request to recorded vote for 11.4, please.
Okay, so we have it moved that 11.1 and 11.3 be taken collectively. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So we'll go to first and second reading of bylaw 11.1 and 11.3. Moving first and second reading, Councillor Ingram and Councillor Burback. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Moving third and final reading, Councillor Beattie and Councillor Clifford for bylaws 11.1 and 11.3. All those in favor? And that's carried. So we'll go to reading for first and second reading of bylaw 11.2. A mover for that. Councillor Bunting and Councillor Beattie. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Motion carries. Bylaw 11.2 to be read a third and final time, moved by Councillor Ingram and Councillor Ritzma. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? One opposed, and that's carried. Bylaw 11.4 with a recorded vote. Councillor Seven, I take it you want the recorded vote on the third and final reading?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Gaffney will move bylaw 11.4 for the first and second reading. A seconder. Councillor Burback. So reading bylaw 11.4, a first and second time. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Two opposed, and that's carried. Third and final reading is moved by Councillor Gaffney. Councillor Henderson will second it. And we'll turn it over to the clerk if there's no discussion to call the question. Madam Clerk.
So through the chair, beginning with Councillor Seven, please state whether you are in support or opposed. Councillor Seven.
Opposed.
Councillor Bunting.
Support.
Councillor Vasilakos.
Support.
Councillor Ingram.
Support.
Councillor Burback.
Support.
Mayor Matheson.
Support.
Councillor Henderson.
Support.
Councillor Beattie.
Support.
Councillor Ritzma.
Support.
Councillor Clifford.
Opposed.
Councillor Gaffney.
Support.
So through you, your worship, that is 9 in support, 2 opposed. There were no declarations of pecuniary interest and no members absent.
Thank you. So that motion will carry. And thank you very much to staff and of course, the Finance Committee for their work. Next item.
Through your worship, item 12 is the consent agenda. Are there any items listed on the consent agenda to be considered by council?
Seeing, oh, Councillor Burback, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like us to consider the no nuisance noise bylaw that was proposed by the city of Ajax. I have had a number of people complain to me about illegal mufflers that create a lot of nuisance noise, and this is a request for the province to actually become a little more firm about being able to clamp down on those illegal muffler modifications so that we can eliminate some of the nuisance noise in the city.
Thank you. Seconder for that, Councillor Bunting. Discussion. All those in, Councillor Bunting, did you want to speak to that? Sorry.
Yes, I would say that I also have received, and probably by other members of council have received complaints or comments from citizens about this particular issue, and it's getting worse, and it has got worse over COVID, I feel. It's right across the province and quite likely across Canada, to be honest. There's too much of this illegal muffler thing going around, and I certainly support taking this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Seven.
Thank you. I'm not sure who to direct the question to, but is this something, I assume this is something that is covered under a bylaw or law or something. We keep mentioning illegal mufflers. I'm just wondering, is this not covered already somewhere in the law?
I think what would be the way to look at it is there are requirements under the Highway Traffic Act with regards to what is permitted and not permitted. There has been some getting away from that enforcement over time, and there's been many modifications made, but the legislation and regulation has not changed. So the hope is that there could be a relook at it, I believe, and start moving in that direction so that it could help meet the requirements of what neighborhoods expect now versus what has been permitted in the past.
Thank you.
All right. Anything further? Councillor Burback, my apologies.
Sorry, I was just going to say that they're asking to put a decibel limit on it, which there wasn't in the past, and also impose larger fines. So those are a couple of the differences.
Thank you. Anything further? All right, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. There's nothing else on the consent agenda. We'll go to new business, and I believe Councillor Ingram recognized that you have some items.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of items. The first one is just for to reiterate a message that was posted on the City of Stratford Facebook page not too long ago, and it was in relation to something that someone had brought forward over social media. And I think this message is really important. So I'd like to reiterate. I'm going to read directly from the post. And it says, the City of Stratford welcomes constructive criticism. We do take our commitment to the people we serve seriously, and if we fall short or miss the mark in the delivery of our programs or services, we want to know about it. The best way to provide that feedback is by reaching out to city staff, either by phone, email, or through the report and issue form on our website, on the City of Stratford website. It's www.stratford.ca. We do actively engage on social media, and we try to respond to questions when and where we can. But there are times when it's simply more appropriate to contact staff directly to ask a question, express a concern, or try to resolve an issue. This is one of those times. Posting accusations about specific employees in a public forum like this one is unfair to those employees, especially if they are unable to respond, to defend themselves, or to convey their side of the story. And that may leave people with an incomplete picture. Again, we encourage constructive criticism. We just want to ensure that it's directed to the appropriate people so that it can be properly addressed. And I think that's a really important message for everybody to remember, that the court of public opinion on social media is not always a fair process to engage with staff if you have an issue. So do please try to contact city staff directly if you have a problem, a complaint, or a concern that you'd like to bring forward. And that sort of dovetails into my second item, which is, given the amount of negativity that has been coming forward recently, both in the world, in the news, and on social media, I have a list actually of good news stories, acts of kindness, if you will, and these all relate to our transit staff. Things that have happened recently that probably don't get as much notice as they should, and perhaps maybe this list could be posted on social media as opposed to some of the negativity. But our staff have, in the recent past stopped at a house fire to knock on doors to get people out to safety, and they offered to keep them on the bus to keep them safe and warm. They stopped to purchase water for a passenger who was dehydrated and was in distress. They stopped to purchase water for a police officer who was directing traffic all day in very hot conditions. They assisted those less fortunate, allowing them to ride the bus and get out of unfavorable elements. They assisted those less fortunate by getting them in touch with social services. They have purchased food and a hot drink for someone who was in need, and staff do this frequently, our transit staff do. They have stopped the bus when there was a loose pet on the road and assisted the owner with retrieving the dog. They stopped the bus to assist a resident that had turned over his mobility scooter, and this resident was not a passenger on the bus at the time. They've arranged for an extra driver, managerial staff with an empty bus to demonstrate travel training to a resident in a mobility device, how to board the bus and strap the chair in safely. They've drove and delivered cell phones, tablets, wallets, bus passes, groceries, and other items of value to the schools and general riders when they leave these items on the bus. Mobility staff have delivered meals a few times a week to customers that find it difficult to leave their homes. Mobility staff have performed wellness checks to a few of their customers that live alone with no family members to speak of and have health issues. And transit drivers have witnessed, or a transit driver witnessed a pedestrian hit and run, remained on the scene, offered assistance, and ensured the vehicle involved remained on the scene. So those are just some examples of really good, positive activities that our staff engage in on a regular basis. Again, this is just our transit staff, so one small section of our city, but we really do have some good people working for us. And I wanted to make sure that there was some positivity being shared.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ingram. Councillor Bunting.
Beg your pardon. Through you, Your Worship, I would like to say thank you to the good people from United Way for their kind words regarding the slip sliders team. However, I would like to also point out to members of the community that we are one team of 60 teams already registered. We are 8 walkers of 315 walkers. And there's no way that we could possibly accomplish what we have done if it wasn't for the generosity and the caring of this wonderful community of Stratford that we live in. A huge thank you for all those who have given already, and for those who haven't and would like to, just go to cnoy.org, pick a team, any team, pick a walker, any walker, and donate. Thank you very much indeed for this very worthwhile cause. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Vasilakos.
I was just maybe piggyback on what Councillor Ingram said, because just as an extension of the transit, I was chair of the Stratford Welcomes Refugees Committee that the city launched a number of years ago to welcome families from, that were with refugee status in the city. And without fail, one of the things that the sponsor groups and myself witnessed as well is how open city transit staff were to helping people, quite often people without English as a language at all, navigate the system and get to where they were going safely, and show them how to use the system and be patient with them. So I think that's just another example where city staff are often the face of the city when it comes to welcoming newcomers, and I've heard nothing but good things about that process. Both community services staff, but also social services staff and transit staff.
Thank you. Anything further? There's no other items of new business. We could at this time take a motion to adjourn for the standing committees, and the first one is Planning and Heritage. Councillor Ingram and Councillor Burback, all those in favor? That's carried. Councillor Ritzman, I'll turn the meeting over to you to chair that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'd like to call the Planning and Heritage meeting to order. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Item 3, delegations. There are none scheduled. Item 4 is report of the manager of planning. Item 4.1 is planning report, official plan amendment, OPA 03-21 and zone change amendment Z11-21. And this is for the address of 30 Queensland Road. And at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Bannon to make his presentation on behalf of staff. Mr. Bannon.
Thank you. The subject land is located on the northwest corner of intersection of Lauren Avenue West and Queensland Road, having an area of approximately 1.58 hectares. Following the public meeting that was held in September of 2021 and the neighborhood meeting which was held in November of 2021, the applicant has revised the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications. The purpose of the revised applications is to redesignate the subject lands from residential area to high density residential, and to rezone the subject lands from neighborhood commercial C1-2 to residential 5th density R5(2) special to permit a minimum front yard setback of 13 meters, an exterior side yard setback of 8 meters, and a building height of 21.6 meters. The applicant has revised these applications to reduce the height of the proposed apartment building from 7 stories to 6 stories, which results in 10 less units and a total density of 98 units per hectare. The proposed building has been repositioned to be closer to the intersection of Lauren Avenue and Queensland Road, and the landscaping buffer next to the neighborhood residential properties has been increased. The change in the building location has resulted in a request to reduce the minimum depth of the front and exterior side yard setbacks for the development, and balconies have been shown on all sides of the building. In response to the public comments received at the public meeting and the neighborhood meeting, the applicant has revised the subject applications and the development concept. The following changes have been made. The proposed 7-story apartment building has been reduced to 6 stories. The number of units has been reduced from 162 to 155, which resulted in an overall density of 98 units per hectare, down from 102 units per hectare. The building has been moved closer to the street to increase the setback to 31 meters from the west property line. The amenity area has been moved from the north side of the building to the west and east sides of the building. The parking lot has been reconfigured with a loss of 10 parking spaces and an increased landscape buffer along the north and west property lines, and the municipal walkway is proposed to be closed. The existing use of the property is a vacant former commercial plaza. The surrounding land uses are single detached dwellings to the north and to the south, and multi-residential dwelling to the east, and a commercial dwelling, which is industrial, to the west. The applications were submitted on August 4th and were revised on December 14th of 2021. We've received a planning justification report, geotechnical investigation, shadow study, functional site grading, environmental noise feasibility study, traffic, and a transportation impact study. The proposed official plan amendment seeks to redesignate the subject lands to high density residential. This designation permits a maximum height of 6 stories and a maximum density of 100 units per hectare. The subject applications propose to the intensification of a former commercial plaza through the development of an apartment building with 155 dwelling units. The applicant is proposing a high density residential area with 6-story apartment building. The proposed building is to be located close to the intersection of Lauren Avenue and Queensland, which allows for a street oriented design with direct access to both a collector and an arterial road. The additional height requested through the subject applications will be compatible in terms of scale, density, and design with the neighboring residential development through the location of the proposed building along an arterial road, and the requested zoning bylaw amendment regulations that situate the footprint of the building along Lauren Avenue in Queensland, which minimizes any impacts related to privacy or shadowing on the adjacent residential neighborhood. There is sufficient capacity in the city's municipal services to accommodate the proposed development. In addition, the development contributes to the achievement of a provision of a mix of housing types within the city, as well as it contributes to providing diversity in the housing stock of the primarily single detached residential neighborhood. The lands are located within the city's built boundary as identified on Schedule A of the official plan, which is shown on the slide. The development would contribute to the achievement of the intensification target. In addition, the development provides for the efficient use of land and infrastructure through the redevelopment of a vacant or underutilized site, utilizing the existing municipal infrastructure. In addition to the intensification target, the city's official plan also contains a housing mix target. The official plan specifies that the city's housing target for 2033 is 53% low density, 17% medium density, and 30% high density. The development that is being proposed would create 155 new apartment units, and as a result, the development contributes to the achievement of the official plan target of 30% of all dwelling units within the city to be high density by 2033. The official plans also sets out criteria for establishing new high density residential areas, ensures the compatibility of the development with adjacent development by evaluating applications for those areas. Subject applications provide for a development that is primarily street oriented in design. Access to the development provides a direct connection to Lorne Avenue, which is an arterial road, and Queensland Road, which is a collector street. These vehicular connections minimize traffic impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. The subject site is also located within walking distance to community facilities, specifically speaking of Marsh Pond Park, which is 315 meters away, and TJ Dolan Natural Area, which is 360 meters. To address buffering and privacy, the proposed building is sited 31 meters from the property line that is shared with residential properties located to the west, 49.5 meters from the residential properties to the north. In addition, privacy fencing is proposed between the parking area and the property boundaries, and the reduction in height to 6 stories requested through the revised applications, in combination with that proposed setback from the lot boundaries, ensures that there is no negative impacts with respect to privacy and that appropriate buffering is being provided. The size and scale of the revised development concept provides for integration with the surrounding residential areas, and the subject sites are not located adjacent to any properties designated under the Heritage Act, and municipal services are available to service the proposed development. The density of these lands within the high density designation is 65 units per hectare to 100 units per hectare. The minimum height for lands within this designation is 3 stories and the maximum height is 6. The original application requested a maximum density of 102 units per hectare with a maximum of 7 stories. Following the scheduled public meeting and the neighborhood meeting that followed, the applicant revised their application to a 6-story apartment building with a maximum density of 98 units per hectare, which complies with the requirements in the high density residential designation. Building staff have identified that director's site condition is required to develop the property for residential uses. And as a result, the applicant has completed a record of site condition and it was filed with the Ministry of the Environment on October 7th of 2021. The subject applications conform to the community design strategy of the official plan through the provision of a new form of housing and through the siting of the parking areas and of massing of the building in a manner that assists in the creation of a high quality streetscape by situating the building mass adjacent to the street and at the intersections which frame the street space. The site plan provides for a 6-meter setback landscape buffer along the north property line and a minimum of 7-meter setback along the west property line. The preliminary concept plan that has been submitted shows a row of trees along both properties. The official plan requires that the proposed development be designed to ensure that there are no significant negative impacts with respect to privacy and shadowing, and that appropriate buffering can be provided for any adjacent residential areas. It's important to note that the OP policies require no significant negative impacts with respect to shadowing and privacy, which means that it is anticipated that the development is high density residential in nature will have some impact with respect to shadowing and privacy. To demonstrate that there are no negative impacts with respect to that shadowing, the applicant has submitted a study which assessed the impact of shadowing in the small fall equinox, the summer solstice, and the winter solstice. Generally speaking, the shadowing impacts are considered to be negative if the surrounding property is impacted by shadows for long durations during the day. Residential amenity areas and public open spaces are considered to be the most sensitive to shadow impacts, and commercial properties, parking lots, and public streets are considered to be less sensitive. The shadow study demonstrated that during the spring, summer, and fall, that the shadows are contained with the subject lands. No significant negative impact is anticipated for these periods, as there are no impacts on the adjacent residential buildings or outdoor amenity areas. During the winter, the residential properties located to the north and east of the subject site will experience some shadow impacts. The impacts are considered to be more acceptable in the winter, as outdoor amenity areas are not being used as frequently. In addition, due to the length of the shadows in December, the amenity areas of those properties would have previously experienced shadows from the recently demolished commercial building and the existing fencing. The winter shadowing impacts on 5 properties and will still maintain a minimum of 4 hours of sunlight throughout the winter solstice. The shadow impacts as a result of the proposed development are largely limited to the winter shadows, and there are no significant shadow impacts in spring, summer, or the fall. The subject lands are currently zoned with the site-specific neighborhood commercial C1-2. The amendment has requested to establish a minimum building height of 21.6 meters and 6 stories, whereas 20 meters is permitted in the R5 bracket 2 zone. Maximum building height is requested is within the height range permitted in the high density residential area of 3 to 6 stories, which has been requested through the official plan amendment. The applicant has requested a reduced exterior side yard width of 8 meters, where the R5 bracket 2 zone requires a setback of 10 meters next to Queensland Road. The applicant also requested a reduced front yard depth of 13 meters, whereas 15 meters is required. The site-specific exterior side yard width and front yard depth regulations will assist in creating a strong street presence along the collector street, while still allowing for ample room to allow for enhanced landscaping along Queensland Road and Lorne Avenue west frontages. Through the circulation, we have received several comments. The clerk's office has noted that sufficient parking is to be provided on the subject site. Building Services has asked for a record of site condition, which has been provided. And Canada Post has noted that that mail delivery will be through a centralized lockbox assembly, which is supplied, installed, and maintained by the landowner. Notice of the application was sent to 83 surrounding property owners in August and was published in the Beacon Herald in September. City staff have received comments from 13 area residents, including emails, letters, and phone calls, and a petition with 120 signatures in opposition to the proposed development. As a result of the public interest in the subject application, the neighborhood meeting was held via Zoom on November 30th with the developer and city staff and members of the public in attendance. And I'd like to just quickly go through each of those comments that have been raised, or the issues that have been raised. The physical separation of the proposed building to surrounding residential properties. The proposed buildings are set back 31 meters from the west property line and 49.5 meters from the north property line. The recommended amendment contains a maximum height regulation of 21.6 meters to provide certainty for the future development of the subject lands. The residents also expressed concern with the building height and the number of the proposed residential units. Following the public meeting, neighborhood meeting, and in response to public comments, the height and density of the development was reduced. The applicant has revised their applications to 6 stories, which does result in 10 less units, and has a total density of 98 units per hectare. Now, the concern was the potential for rental units, which would see issues with maintenance and upkeep. And our response is that, regardless of the tenure of the building, between rental or ownership, the maintenance and upkeep of the building would we have discussed some of the privacy shadow and overlook concerns that were raised by the residents. Official plan policies establishing high density residential areas require that no significant negative impacts with respect to shadowing are provided. Shadow impact study has addressed some of those concerns. The study demonstrates that there are no significant negative impacts with respect to shadowing and proposed 6-story building. The setback is approximately 31 meters and 49.5 meters away from residential properties. Based on the proposed height of the building, the west side yard setback requirement is 10.8 meters and the setback to the north property line is only 6 meters. The proposed setback exceeds the minimum setback specified in the R5 bracket 2 zone and provides for adequate separation distance, which minimizes issues of privacy and overlook. There were some concerns with traffic impacts. City engineering staff have reviewed the proposed development and have determined that there are no concerns with respect to the traffic being generated, the location of the proposed access, and the queuing as the size of the proposed development will not generate traffic levels that will impact the size of frequency of queuing occurring on the intersection of Queensland Road and Lorne Avenue West. There's also a concern with the potential for visitor parking on adjacent city streets. For the future site plan application, the provision of on-street visitor parking spaces will be required. The applicant has already submitted a sketch which shows that the zoning bylaw requirement of 1.5 parking spaces per unit can also be provided on the subject lands. Residents have expressed a concern with the absence of commercial uses within the development, and the official plan does not require that high-density residential development include a commercial component. Subject property is located in proximity close to commercial uses along Erie Street. There's also a concern with the potential noise and light impacts on the residential areas. Again, for that future site plan application, details of the lighting for that grade parking areas will be determined. We'll ensure that there's no impacts of lighting onto properties, and the recent development needs to be utilized directional lighting for parking areas to minimize impact on the church. There's also concern with the impact of demolition of the existing buildings, the walls, and rebuilding with new materials. The official plan does not currently contain policies that restrict the demolition of existing buildings where redevelopment is being proposed. The concept plan shows the retention of the existing retaining wall, and the developers expected to demolish, construct, and maintain buildings and structures without damaging adjacent properties. In regards to the concern with a lack of amenities in the area, the applicant has revised the concept plan to provide 2 amenity areas on the property. In addition, we've also noted that there is 2 parks within walking distance of 315 meters and 360 meters to the natural area. Concern was raised about the development impact on property values. I've spoken about this before in front of council, and the impact of property values of affordable housing and high density development has been studied in Canada and the United States across a variety of neighborhoods and development proposals. Of 25 studies being conducted of affordable housing concluded that there was no impact on property values, and the 26th study was inconclusive. There's a concern with the existing walkway creating an unsafe area, and it was a source of neighborhood complaints. And in response to those neighborhood complaints and those concerns, the applicant has revised their concept plan with the intention of closing that public walkway. Finally, there's also one last comment on the cell service and internet signals that would be impacted by the proposed structure. The provision of cellular service is federally regulated and is the responsibility of the individual service providers to address reception concerns of their clients. Vessel Hydro is also responsible to ensure that the customers receive an adequate service for their internet services. Finally, one response was received after the completion of the planning report. The Stratford and District Chamber of Commerce noted that there is a significant shortage of apartment and condominium units available in the market, and that the compact development form that is being proposed protects farmland and avoids urban sprawl, and they encourage council to approve the zoning bylaw amendments. In conclusion, we can state that the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment are consistent with the provincial policy statement. They conform to the city's official plan and the intent of the zoning bylaw, and it's consistent with the city's strategic policies and represents good planning. We note that should the planning and heritage committee not approve the staff recommendation, the motion shall include a statement outlining how the recommendation of the planning and heritage committee complies with the provincial policy statement and the city of Stratford official plan, how public input was being considered. I'm available through the chair to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon, and a reminder to council that Ms. Bridge is also available to answer questions as we go along. So questions from council? Councillor Ingram?
Thank you. My question is whether the height increase for the 21.6 meters includes any of the rooftop mechanical equipment or no?
Through the chair, it's through our understanding that the height of the mechanical equipment was not increased as a result of the changes. My understanding is that it just lowered 1 story in height. The applicant is available tonight to answer questions, and I believe that they do have a short presentation. And maybe at the conclusion of that presentation, they can confirm that the height has not increased with that mechanical equipment.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bannon, your audio has been really choppy for your presentation, and it was through that response as well. So I think what I heard is that you'd like me to ask that question of the consultant at the end of their presentation. Is that correct?
That is correct, is my understanding. I'll try to speak a little bit slower to make sure that the audio picks up everything. But it's my understanding that the roof equipment was not increased in size as a result of reducing the height of the building by 1 story. And I just made mention that the applicant is here tonight. They will be doing a presentation and they can confirm that that is correct, and that the height hasn't been increased.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Feb.
Thank you. Thank you. Just a couple questions up right now. So given that the height restriction for high density is 6 stories, would the original 7-story proposal have been an option?
Through the chair, the original request was to allow for 7 stories, and it also requested a change to the high density provisions in the official plan to allow for the increased density. So by reducing the height of the store, reducing the stories by 1 story from 7 down to 6, they no longer need that provision, that request through the official plan of the increased density, and they no longer need the zoning bylaw specific amendment to allow for the height of 7 stories instead of 6.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question for right now is, there are not to be, as you mentioned, any significant negative impacts with respect to privacy. And I'm just like, I think there's 17 homes that directly abut the property and then many more around. I'm just wondering what, and I don't know, I'm just sort of speaking frankly, like if a 6-story apartment building would not constitute a significant negative impact on privacy, I'm just wondering what would trigger that then if this does not?
Mr. Bannon?
Sorry, through the chair, it is our opinion that the location of the building being set back, the distance that it is away from those property lines, increases the privacy of those neighboring residential dwelling units. When the building's set back that far, it's such a distance away that the neighboring residential properties, the privacy of those properties is, the impacts on those properties is very minimal. Also with the shadowing that has been shown and the way that they've situated the building at the intersection, it reduces the shadowing impacts. So that is very minimal in the winter months. And the impacts of those, the existing shadowing from the previous building and the fence were likely greater than what's being created by the property. So it's a combination of the location of the building, the reduced height from 7 down to 6 stories, and the current setbacks that are being proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions before we go to the delegations? Seeing none, there is a motion that the delegations from the following persons regarding OPA 30-21 and zone change amendment Z11-21 be heard. And the following are the delegates that wish to be heard: Joel Doherty and Hugh Handy, developer and planner for the applicant, Krista Robinson, Ian McLeod, and Edward Sinez. A mover to hear those delegates. Thank you, Mayor Matheson and Councillor Henderson. All in favor?
Excuse me. I believe Ms. Defoe is trying to get your attention.
I am so sorry.
Through the chair, my apologies. We did receive correspondence during this meeting that Ian McLeod is unable to attend and is unable to speak, so he can be removed from the list.
Thank you so much. And thank you for identifying that, Councillor Vasilakos. So we're going on to, I'm looking through the clerk if the applicant is available.
So through the chair, if we could please have the question called on the
Oh,
delegations
sorry.
excluding Ian. Thank you.
Yes. So all those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you.
And then through the chair, I see Joel Doherty is now present.
There you are, Mr. Doherty, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. And thank you, Mr. Bannon, for your presentation this evening. Mr. Bannon covered most of what I intended to say earlier tonight. Basically, we believe we have a balanced proposal that really looks at intensification, curbing sprawl, building up, not building out, repurposing an underutilized property, balancing feasibility and a strong market need for housing choice, apartments, condominiums, as well as really looking at the neighborhood and trying to step back, as Mr. Bannon indicated, as far back as we can, and really providing a good buffer, landscape buffer around the property as well. So really balancing all of those needs and making sure the project's still feasible. As well as listening to the neighborhood. In our time in the community, we've had the opportunity to meet with and speak with a number in the business community as well, including the Chamber of Commerce, Stratford Hospital, and others in the business community. And it's become really apparent, based on our own market research, but as well in speaking to those in the community, how dire the situation is in terms of need for housing choice, for rental units, for condominium units, for single detached housing, for all product types along the spectrum. And we understand it's a real challenge for employers in recruiting employees into the market as well. And so we feel this project is something that'll be much needed and will bring 155 units to the Stratford community. So now I'll turn it over to our planning consultant, Hugh Handy with GSP Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Chair Ritzma, Mayor Matheson, and members of council, staff, as well as those watching. My name is Hugh Handy, and I'm a Senior Associate and Land Use Planner with GSP Group. I'll be brief this evening. Joel sort of highlighted our thoughts and have worked with, obviously, staff and the community through the process, as well as council, hearing your thoughts. We've reviewed the staff report before you this evening. Mr. Doherty and I are in support of the recommendation that is before you. As mentioned, Mr. Bannon has done an excellent job of highlighting the comments and really our response to those and moving the building closer to the corner of Queensland and Lorne. And so with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions of the committee. I guess to answer one of the questions that I've just heard in terms of the height, it is the mechanical will be above the height requested in terms of 6 stories. And I believe that's in accordance with your zoning bylaw. But happy to have Mr. Bannon or Ms. Bridge answer that as well. And in terms of the impacts, we believe that the pulling of the building closer to the street hopefully addresses in combination with adding a further buffer to the inclusion of this use and within the neighborhood. So with that, I think Joel and I would be happy to answer any questions we can.
Thank you. Questions from Councillor? Councillor Ingram, please.
Thank you. So I greatly appreciate your willingness to meet with the residents in the neighborhood, revising the proposal, moving the building closer to Lorne Ave, Queensland Road, giving it a lot more street presence. I still maintain that it would have been nice to have some commercial units in there just to serve the neighborhood, but I understand your position. And I do appreciate the enhanced landscape buffer. So as for the mechanical equipment, how high above the 21.6 meters will that be? And I suspect it will not be a large increase or have any impact on the shadow study, but just wondering how high that mechanical equipment would be. And then I do have a follow-up.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. I believe it's 3 or 4 meters, and it would have been incorporated in terms of the shadow study, and it's not along the whole footprint of the building, if you will.
Follow-up, Councillor Ingram?
Yes, thank you. So I do I understand then that it would be in the center of the roof line? Would that be correct? It's not going to be situated at the end?
Through you, Chair. I don't believe it would be right at the end, no.
Perfect, thank you. And as for the landscaping, that's my follow-up question, if I may. The trees that you are showing in the landscape buffer, approximately how high will they be? And will they, in fact, block some of that shadow impact that might be happening on the adjacent properties?
The detailed design is still to come in terms of landscaping and site works, et cetera. But we have spent considerable time thinking about the neighbors and thinking about those trees. So our intent is to put in fast growing trees, if you will. I want to say 2.5, 3 meters to start. But we're looking at that. It hasn't been fully determined, but again, keeping in mind the neighbors and wanting to get that good buffer up and running early.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ingram. Anything further from other council members? Seeing none. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So I'm going to look to the clerk if Krista Robinson is available.
Through the chair, we are working to connect Krista Robinson.
Thank you.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you again for allowing me to speak quickly on this matter. I keep hearing comments from staff and from the developers that there's no negative impact or that the impact is minimal. Well, to the neighborhood, any impact is an impact. We're not talking just about shadowing, but we're talking about the balconies overlooking our backyards, because 6 stories is looking right into the backyards of those properties on that side of Sprung Court. As I mentioned before, our neighborhood is already well established and not suited for high density, especially not 6 stories. The developers have said that they've listened to the community. Well, us as neighbors really don't feel that they've listened to us. Now we're being told 6 stories plus all the HVAC units on top of the 6 stories. So now we get to hear the noise from such units. We realize that there is a need for various forms of housing in Stratford, and infilling is a great way to achieve this. But a 3 or 4 story building at this location can achieve just that. There are many 4-story buildings already located throughout Stratford that have been beautifully created by a well-known local developer, so it is possible. Councillor Gaffney made a motion at a previous council meeting asking staff to review the various locations in the city of Stratford that would be appropriate for high-density housing. If this developer wants to build a high-rise, then he should go to wherever that location will be. High-density residential areas are to be intermixed with medium-density development and/or commercial, office, and institutional components. This is a residential neighborhood with single detached houses. The size and scale of this proposed building does not integrate with the adjacent residential area. I urge council to tell these developers that if they want to build in Stratford, we're not going to change the official plan, have them be allowed to develop in this location. That if they want to build here 3 or 4 stories development is the only way to go at this location of 30 Queensland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Any questions from council? Seeing none, thank you again. Moving down the list then, I'm looking to the clerk. Is Mr. Sinez available?
Through the chair, we are working to connect Edward now.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
With the clerk, I had provided a presentation. Do you have that handy? Or would you like me to present my screen?
I think it's coming up.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I think, council, that a picture is worth 1,000 words. What you're proposing right now is going to be my front yard. That's a 5-story building. You're proposing a 6-story building. How does this have no negative impact on my life, on the lives of the neighborhood? Great that you received one letter from, what was it, the Chamber of Commerce, I believe, somebody like that. But you also received 120 petitions against this proposal. There's only 83 residents here. Basically, everybody in the neighborhood is saying no, too high. So why is it that our voice is not heard on this subject? I'm reading through and listening to this very, very elegant presentation in regard to very minimal impact, no impact to my property value. These balconies, don't know what people will be doing on them during the summer months while we're out in our backyards. You're telling me, you can look at me with a straight face and tell me that this has no impact on my property value. That is 5 stories. Is this the Stratford that we're looking to produce? What happened to the Stratford that abandoned the railway in favor of the theater? They really took heart on the aesthetics and the community that we live in. I moved here in '96 because of that. Now I'm considering moving out. So, council, I leave it to you. It's in your hands. Please take a look at this picture and tell me that you would live in this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sinez. Questions from council? Seeing none, thank you again. And that concludes our delegations. The next item is there's a motion that the correspondence from the following persons regarding OPA 03-21 and zone change amendment Z11-21 be received from information. That's from Mr. Hanley, Ms. Dale, and Mike and Sue Borsa. The mover for that. Thank you, Councillor Gaffney, and I see the clerk's hand there as well. Thank you.
Through the chair, may I please also just add the correspondence on the addendum from the Stratford Chamber of Commerce to this motion?
Thank you. And the mover, Councillor Gaffney, you're okay with that, and the seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Burback. Call the question. All in favor of receiving those items? And that's unanimous. Moving on, we have a staff recommendation, and that staff recommendation is that the application OP 03-21 to redesignate 30 Queensland Road from residential area to high density residential area be approved, that the application Z11-21 to amend the zoning on 30 Queensland Road from neighborhood commercial C1-2 to a residential 5th density R5(2) with site-specific regulations be approved for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the provincial policy statement. The request is in conformity with the goals, objectives, and policy of the official plan. The official plan amendment and zone change will provide for a development that is appropriate for the lands. The public was consulted during the application circulation, and comments have been received in writing or at the public meeting, have been reviewed, considered, and analyzed within the planning report, and that council pass a resolution that no further notice is required under section 34(17) of the Planning Act. A mover for that staff recommendation. Moved by Councillor Clifford, seconded by Councillor Bunting. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Seven.
Thank you. So I don't support the motion, and I just had a question for Mr. Bannon before I comment any further. So the staff recommendation is saying that this request is in conformity with the goals and objectives of the policies of the official plan, and that the amendment will provide for development that is appropriate for the lands. I'm just having trouble reconciling that with the fact that according to the official plan, this is a stable residential area with a maximum height of 3-story development. So I'm just wondering if you could help walk me through how that, how it's in conformity and how it will fit into those criteria.
Thank you, Councillor Seven. And Mr. Bannon?
Through the chair, yes. Stable residential areas.
You're breaking up, Mr. Bannon. Your audio is, thank you.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect from the VPN. If I get disconnected, I will be right back. I just have to wait for the connection to come back, and that will improve my audio. So give me
You're
one.
nice and clear. You're nice and clear right now.
I'm okay now? Okay.
Yes, you were very clear.
Okay. The high density residential area criteria is contained in the official plan policy.
Mr. Bannon, maybe you better disconnect.
Disconnection, one moment.
And this bridge is also available if Mr. Bannon doesn't reconnect. So let's give him a moment.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
You're very clear right there, yes.
Okay, so I'm sure it's the VPN that's doing it. It just allows me to access the city documents on our server. So within stable residential areas, there are policies in the official plan which contain a framework for any new development within those stable residential areas. As previously mentioned in the report and briefly in the presentation, the application satisfies the framework in those stable residential areas with the location of the building on the corner of Lorne Avenue West and Queensland Road, and the scale of the development with respect to the massing and the densities of the adjacent buildings. Because it has a setback of 49.5 meters from between the building and the adjacent residence to the north, and 31 meters to the properties to the west. Parking is orientated to the rear of the building, which minimizes visual impacts on the adjacent streets. The density exceeds the maximum densities that are specified in the official plan of section 4533. And the official plan amendment was recognized or requested to recognize the proposed densities that are being proposed. Shadow studies were submitted. Grading reports were submitted. We recognize that it's not within the Heritage Act, no properties that are designated under the Heritage Act. And the development has vehicular access from Lorne Avenue West and Queensland Road and pedestrian access to the intersection of those two streets. So it's our opinion that the development doesn't hamper the orderly development of the adjacent properties and has regard for the city's urban design guidelines through the siting of the proposed buildings close to the intersection, the street intersection. So the policies that are brought forward in stable residential areas, when we're changing those policies to high density residential areas, the development that's being proposed checks off the boxes that need to be checked off in order to allow for those changes to be made. So I'm not sure. I'm thinking that hopefully that answers Councillor Seven's question, but if you have any further questions, I'd be happy to respond.
Follow up, Councillor Seven?
Thank you. And I guess, yeah, I appreciate your response. I guess I'm having trouble with that we have a policy and official plan that limits stable residential areas to 3 stories. And what it feels like to me is that as long as we're adding in developments that are higher than that, what's stated in the policy, as long as we're doing it to sort of mitigate as best as possible for that location, then it's okay to sort of go against that part of the policy. So I'm just sort of trying to imagine a scenario where we wouldn't go ahead with that, where we could mitigate some of the factors that were concerned. But that's more of just a thought. I don't think I necessarily have to respond. You're welcome to Mr. Bannon through the chair, but that's my comments for now. So I'll let others.
Thank you, Councillor Seven. Other questions from council? Councillor Ingram?
Thank you. I have to admit that I am struggling a little bit with some of the components of policy 4.6.4. I agree that there's a mix of development forms and densities, but with the inclusion of this development, it's part 2 of that. The high density residential uses are intermixed with medium density development and or commercial office and institutional components as part of a mixed use development. I recognize that there are some medium density developments in the area, specifically the townhouse developments that are across the street and then a little bit further away on Athlone Crescent, as well as the newer apartment building that is at the corner of, I believe it's Freeland and Lorne Ave. So I do recognize that there are some medium density developments, but part of transition policies for low density residential neighborhoods do put a cap on the height and scale. Generally speaking, it can go up to 6 stories, but 4 stories is generally more appropriate in a lot of more context specific situations. And so I'm kind of struggling with that, how this one is integrated with the adjacent residential area. And I recognize that there is an enhanced landscape buffer and that the building has been moved further away from the adjacent low density residential areas. But I have to admit, I am struggling with the compliance with policy 4.6.4.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Seven?
Yeah. So I guess I would like to request a recorded vote for this item. I don't support it. Definitely Councillor Ingram's comments 4.6.4 and 4.6.4, the third section of that one, as far as negative impacts, significant negative impacts with respect to privacy in particular. I understand the rationalization there, but I can't, there's just, to me, there's no way that going from, I don't know, a 2-story home abutting your property in the rear or whatever the case would turn into a 6-story apartment and not negatively significantly impact somebody's privacy. So I was just, I oppose the motion for some of those reasons.
Okay, I'll look to the clerk. There she is. So Council, Madam Clerk, I believe the motion has been moved and seconded, and we're looking for a recorded vote.
So through the chair, yes, that is correct. Beginning with Councillor Seven, please state whether you are in support or opposed to the motion. Councillor Seven.
Opposed.
Councillor Bunting.
Support.
Councillor Vasilakos.
Support.
Counselor Ingram,
Reluctantly, I'm going to support this application. I note that it does comply with the provincial policy statement. There are many, many pieces of the official plan that it does comply with. And so from a planning perspective, I'm struggling a little bit with a couple of pieces, but I will support the application.
Counselor Burback,
Support.
Mayor Matheson,
Support.
Counselor Henderson,
Support.
Counselor Beatty,
Support.
Counselor Ritzma,
Opposed.
Counselor Clifford,
Support.
Counselor Gaffney,
Opposed.
So through the chair, there are 8 in support, 3 opposed. There are no members absent and no declarations of pecuniary interest.
So that motion is carried. Thank you. Moving down to item number 5. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn planning and heritage. Moved by Councillor Henderson, second by Councillor Burback. Thank you. All in favor? And we're opposed. I mean, we're adjourned.
Before I call this meeting to order, I've been asked to, by a show of hands or nods of heads if anybody needs a break. I don't see any hands being raised or anything, so we'll carry on. I'll call this meeting of the Finance and Labor Relations Committee to order. Item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. See none. We have item 3, subcommittee minutes are attached. Item 4, delegations, none scheduled. Item 5, report of the acting director of corporate services. 5.1, consideration of the Stratford City Center Business Improvement Area 2022 budget. Carmen, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Yes, I saw moved by Councillor Ingram and second by Councillor Clifford. Thank you. Anybody have any questions for the acting director? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. Item 5.2, Santa Parade 2021 and Special Projects Reserve Fund. Do I see a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Clifford and Councillor Ritzma. Does anybody have any questions or comments? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Item 5.3, insurance renewal for 2022 and risk management update. Moved by Councillor Vasilakos, second by Councillor Beatty. Any questions or comments on that item? Councillor Clifford.
Mr. Chair, I was just going to ask our director, like the cost of insurance has been going up annually last while. Is that something we're going to expect again in 2023, or has she had any talk with our insurance people that are helping us?
Yeah, go ahead, Carmen.
Through the chair, thanks. This is almost impossible for me to predict on this one. We've had numerous conversations with our insurer and we continue to do so. Part of the rationale for the increases was included in the report as far as some of the bigger pressures. There was some impacts with respect to industry changes for various areas such as cyber insurance or various things like environmental that I would say the insurance industry can and does determine their willingness to invest in those areas annually. So it's difficult to predict where they're going to hang their hat, or which industries or which risk areas they're going to pull out of or want to cover off their risks more carefully. So, it is something that is a bit of a revolving question, in that we can't really predict how it's going to go, but we certainly are working with our insurer to determine whether or not our insurance broker, I should say, to determine whether or not some of these increases are market representative, or if they are specific to that individual insurer representative. So we're, if and when the need arises, it is something that we can look at going out to request for proposals at an earlier date than what our original agreement was. So the best I can suggest is that we are keeping on top of it and trying to establish whether this is something that is to be expected going forward or not. I will share with you that our broker was a little bit surprised at the amount of the increase, but also commented that Stratford's increase was not as great as other municipalities of similar size and in our area. So, that's the good news, I guess, is that we're not experiencing some of these increases to the same degree as some of our neighbors, but doesn't make it any easier to swallow when we have that. So one of the other areas that I've also been exploring, and I do sort of each review, is whether our level of deductible is appropriate, and whether that's an area where we can realize some savings in our premium costs. But our deductible now is sitting at a level of approximately $50,000 for most types of our claims. So we'd have to increase that double to realize a minor impact in our premium costs. So those are some of the considerations that we look at. So I don't know if I answered your question, Councillor Clifford, but it is something that we do watch and we do look at, and we try to mitigate as best as possible.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. Councillor Vasilakos.
So there is a growing risk that municipalities are not going to have access to cyber insurance at some point or another, and it's been flagged. And this has come up also with public health units. This is something that it is almost an untenable situation if municipalities and health units and other institutions can't get access to cyber insurance. And so I'm wondering, just to flag that after we deal with this motion, if I could make a motion around correspondence to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and copy to AMO to flag this as a serious concern for us in the next few years.
Did we do that, Madam Clerk?
So through the chair, there is a motion on the floor. So once this motion the question has been called on this motion, then yes, we can go back to Councillor Vasilakos and she can put a new motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on the motion on the floor? See none, I'll call the question. All those sorry, I saw Carmen's hand go up first.
Through the chair, thanks. Just to comment briefly on that. Again, as I kind of alluded to when I was speaking earlier, the insurance industry can, pick and choose what types of risks they'll insure. And while we haven't seen any indication that cyber insurance is going to like coverage or options are going to be eliminated altogether, the costs of those are increasing. And so I will point out, though, just for the city of Stratford, is that it is an area of large concern, but it's also one that our insurer recognizes that we've implemented significant amounts of controls and significant amounts of processes in place to cover off some of those risks. And so they're recognizing Stratford as a gold star in that regard, because there are many municipalities and many organizations that do not have the resources nor the infrastructure in place to be able to even meet that standard to get insurance. But from my conversations with our insurer, is that it's not necessarily something that you can't get or that you won't be able to get in the future. It's just at what cost and what And at some point in time, there may be a conversation that the city needs to look at, self-insuring for that type of risk, because we do already self-insure for other types of risks that are not covered by insurance or are below our threshold.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Did you want to add something, Councillor Vasilakis?
Yeah, I think it's worth sending a letter outlining some of the challenges in the area of cyber insurance, and one of the, you will always be able to get it if you meet a standard, but if the standard is so high, a lot of organizations either won't be able to afford it or won't be able to meet the standard just simply because of how the organization runs, or the number of people involved, or the controls that are necessary to get anything done. And so it is. And I would say that it's one thing to self-insure for slips and falls and some of those things, but a significant cyber incident, I'm not exactly sure that that is something that municipalities, health units, I'm looking at some of our Spruce Lodge, which is our care home. I think while we're looking at the municipality, the corporation itself, we do have a number of other institutions that we, are part of our own that could never self-insure and also may not be able to meet the standards that are required going forward. So I'd like to make a motion to write just a letter outlining some of these challenges to the, I believe it's Administrative and Municipal Affairs and I forget exactly what it is now, but then also copy to AMO to flag.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Burback. Any questions or clarifications needed? If not, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Item 6 for information of committee. There's some minutes attached from Stratford to the World Advisory Committee. Item 7, adjournment. Moved by Councillor Bunting, seconded by Councillor Beattie. All those in favor? That's carried. Thanks, everybody.
So I'll call the Infrastructure, Transportation and Safety Committee to order. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none, item number 3 is subcommittee minutes. They were there for you to peruse at your leisure. Delegations, we do have one scheduled, but we'll cover it under item number 6. Item number 5 is report of the Manager of Public Works, and it was an item about a source separator organics processing agreement. There was discussion at subcommittee, and there is subcommittee recommendation. Could I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Gaffney, seconded by Councillor Ritzma. Are there any comments or questions for staff on that item? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Henderson? Nope. Okay, so.
Yeah, I do. Sorry. I just had a quick question. I can't remember. We're looking at apartments for and higher and more businesses than that. Will that be included in that cost?
Okay, Mr. Kirklaw, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, as we take on more collection services, it will increase the cost for us to process it. So indirectly, yes, that will increase the cost.
So do we have a timeline of when we think the apartments 4 and up will be? Like, will this come back to us later in the year, in this budget year?
Through the chair, actually, the cost for processing was actually included in the initial contracts. There's no adjustments that any of you take at this time.
Oh, okay.
Any other comments or questions? If not, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. So moving on to item number 6, which is report of the city clerk, and item 6.1 is the encroachment application for 7 Coburg Street. And before we get to the subcommittee recommendations, we do have a motion that the addendum to the ITS committee be added, and that the motion is that the correspondence from Robert Lemon dated February 11th, along with various letters of support regarding an encroachment application for 7 Coburg Street be received for information. So could I get a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Burbach, seconded by Councillor Ingram. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And then the next motion was that the delegation by Robert Lemon regarding an encroachment application for 7 Coburg Street be heard. Moved by Councillor Burbach, seconded by Councillor Bunting. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And Mr. Lemon, go ahead as soon as you're able.
Can you hear me?
Yep, and we can
Okay.
see.
Okay.
Please go ahead, and you have, if
Okay.
you have 5 minutes.
And I'll try to be brief because I know I've spoken to a number of you last month for the subcommittee, and I do want to support, thank you for the support for the parking encroachment at that time. But I do want to address a few things tonight. And first of all, to compliment the clerk on such thorough minutes of the meeting. I'm not used to that. We're having worked for the city of Vancouver for a number of years. Our minutes are nowhere near as thorough as yours, but there is one correction, and that's on page 5, that the date of the occupancy permit was October 1st, 2001, not 2021. And that's part of what I would like to speak to you about tonight is the not just the parking easement, parking encroachment, but the encroachment requirement for the ramp and the planter that are before you as part of this recommendation. And I have a chance to review the fence and hedge bylaw over the weekend. And I think that I'm correct in that the elements that are being discussed, the ramp and the planter, would conform to elements that are covered under the fence as considered fences under the hedge and fence bylaw. And because they were installed in 2001, before the fence and hedge bylaw existed, which was 2003, that they're actually grandfathered. So I would like to make a case for, particularly about that the ramp and planter, as you may see from the material I submitted last month, the ramp particularly is essentially the access to the main door, which is on the side of the building, and is a distinctive part of the architecture of the building. And the architectural design is something that, of course, is what appealed to me to purchase it in the first place in 2019. Shim Sutcliffe designed the building. They're probably Canada's best known architects. And one of their houses in Toronto has recently been deemed a modern heritage building, the Craven Road House. And my intent, having spoken with Ms. Bridge last year, was to have the Tower House, the Morris Tower House at 7 Coburg, also designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act as a modern heritage building to add to the complement of heritage buildings that Stratford is known for. So the ramp is quite important, and it serves as the access to the door. The planter and the retaining wall are integral to the architecture of the building, in fact, structurally intact and part of the building. And they were not added later. They were added as part of the building, the original design, and were approved when the occupancy permit was issued on October 1st, 2001. So I don't think they actually need to have an encroachment agreement. And I would argue that because they have no value, commercial value, the parking space does have value. So I'm thrilled that your support will continue to support the parking space as an encroachment. But I'd argue that the ramp and the planter add no value. And so there's no reason to have an encroachment for them, and certainly not with a fee. But I haven't seen and I'm willing to enter into the agreement for the parking space, but there was a note in the minutes about a termination clause. And I'd like to know from the manager of planning whether a termination clause would affect and jeopardize the future use of 7 Coburg and its parking requirements. So that's something that I think I would like to have a discussion with staff about the implication and the wording of the agreement for the parking space, but certainly willing to consider one if it's suitable to future planning needs for 7 Coburg. As you know, this whole thing came about because of the application I made to rezone 7 and 9 Coburg back last year, and that the non-conforming parking space became apparent at that point. So I'm happy and thrilled that with the support so far from the subcommittee, and I'd hope that the full committee and council would support the parking agreement. But I do argue that the parallel agreements for the encroachment of the ramp and the planter are not justified. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Lemon? Councillor Ingram, go ahead.
So thank you, Mr. Lemon. I appreciate the opportunity to hear you speak again on this topic. I know it's something that's you're quite passionate about. I do respectfully disagree with you with respect to the planters and the ramp. They are solid structures. They are built physical structures, and therefore any physical structure that encroaches into the municipal right-of-way is an encroachment, and therefore would require the agreement with the necessary fee attached to it. So I do respectfully disagree with your opinion.
If I have a chance to reply through the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm reading to you the definition of fence. It's in the fence and hedge bylaw, and it says a fence includes any one of the combination of the following: a railing, a wall, a structure, except utility structures, a barrier of any construction of any kind whatsoever, a masonry wall, a retaining wall, or other similar substances, earth beams, or other man-made similar structures. So I would argue that the ramp is a structure that's as defined as a fence under the fence bylaw, and certainly the retaining wall, which supports the planter, is clearly listed as an item that's deemed to be a fence, none of which need encroachments.
Are there any other comments or questions for Mr. Lemon? Councillor Henderson, go ahead.
I wonder if somebody from staff could explain to us, what Mr. Lennon has just told us, how that actually plays out in the Planning Act or whatever. Why?
So Councillor Henderson, you can ask that question when we go to the subcommittee recommendation, and then you can ask questions.
Okay.
We can discuss it then. But these are questions specific for Mr. Lemon before we let him sign off or turn off his video. Any other comments or questions? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Lemon. So now we can move on. We do have a subcommittee recommendation there. Are there any comments for staff before I ask for, go ahead, Councillor Henderson.
Yes, I'd like to know what Mr. Lennon was saying, reading from that. Sometimes there's a definition in one section of like the bylaw and then the zoning. I'd like to know how that applies each other. Like, so he's saying it's under the fence and hedges, but how are we bringing it forward under, I think it's the zoning? Can somebody explain to him, explain to him how that works and why there's the difference there?
So go ahead, Ms. Defoe.
So through the chair, I'm going to do my best to explain this. So the city has a encroachment policy, and in that policy, there is a section which states that where additional parking cannot be provided on private property and subject to prior approval on an application under the Planning Act as required, an encroachment agreement may be approved to permit private parking on the road allowance or municipal property in accordance with the fence and hedge bylaw. In the encroachment policy, that is the only reference to the fence and hedge bylaw, and it does specifically relate to the parking space. With respect to the other items which encroach, it would fall under the encroachment policy and not the fence and hedge bylaw, is my understanding. And then with respect to the links to the zoning bylaw, I will refer to our manager of planning to correct me with anything that may be incorrect right now. But it's my understanding the current use of the property does not require parking. If in the future it is amended to permit a residential dwelling use, they would require a parking space. But I will again refer to the manager of planning just to clarify anything that may have not been correct or fully stated there.
Oh, Mr. Crinkle, go ahead.
Yeah, so the chair, the manager had to leave us, but she did give me some notes regarding this. So under, from a zoning perspective, there are other options for providing parking that would meet planning requirements. One would be the current encroachment agreement. Also, there is a request for a parking rate of 0 spaces. There's also the option of confirming that you have space from a leased private lot. And there's also the option to request parking rate of 0 spaces provided cash in lieu. So really there are some options that can be done to the planning perspective if that happens that this encroachment agreement does decide to cease.
And I had a question around that, the idea of the how are we defining the structures that are there, and just historically, when we have these items that are discovered during construction, Valentine Avenue is an example. These kinds of structures are considered encroachments under our current bylaws, are they not? Ms. Defoe, go ahead.
So through the chair, yes, that is correct, but I do see the director join, so I will also leave it to him if there's any further information he'd like to provide.
Yeah, Mr. McCall.
Yeah, just to the chair, and past reconstruction projects, that's typically when we enforce this type of encroachment, and we have done similar planters, fences, similar type of structures.
So it's in keeping with past practices of how we apply this. Okay, thank you. Councillor Seven, go ahead, and then Councillor Clifford.
Thank you. I think I have a couple questions. My first question is, what is, and I just can't remember, what is the current zoning, and what was, do we know what the original zoning was for this property when it was built?
Through the chair, unfortunately, the manager of planning has left the meeting, and I don't have that information at the tip of my fingers.
Okay, that's okay.
Ms. Defoe, did you want to?
So through the chair, as noted in the report, so the property is currently subject to a zone change application, which is requesting to amend the existing central commercial zoning to a site-specific C3 zone to permit the existing buildings at 7 and 9 Coburg Street to be used as a dwelling unit.
Okay. Thank you for that. And just to follow up or to carry on here. So if this, like, I understand reconstruction, mentioned Valentine there. Is this something that because there is no reconstruction clearly going on at the moment for this. So is this a case where something like this would typically be grandfathered in from some time in the past? Like, have we had other instances where there's something built and it's not accounted for in an encroachment of any kind, and then it's discovered, and then is it always the case? Is there a precedent to sort of make an encroachment with a fee, or is it something that is sort of added on for a nominal fee rather than a real encroachment fee?
Ms. Defoe, go ahead.
So through the chair, yes, we often have a number of developments which are going through potentially like a change, for example, a zoning bylaw amendment. And at that time, it's identified that there are items which encroach onto municipal property. And then therefore, at that time, we requested an encroachment agreement be entered into, and the fees are outlined in the policy. I do believe there may have been historical items that were grandfathered. However, I believe the city's current approach is to enter into an encroachment agreement with the property owners for any items that encroach. And I will just defer to the Chief Administrative Officer for any additional background that could be provided.
Ms. Thompson, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So there have been existing encroachments. Once they are discovered by the city, we require entering into an encroachment agreement. In the past, we have also had encroachment agreements in place. So they go back many, many years. And it is a requirement that if someone wants to continue to use our property because of an inadvertent type encroachment, that we bring them forward to council. It would be my recommendation that we continue to deal with encroachments in the manner under the policy, including a fee. The city does incur costs to administer the encroachment program on behalf of the city of Stratford, including the requirement to track them, as well as to require to make sure that the insurance coverage is kept up to date on those to manage our risk.
Councillor Clifford, Councillor Bunting, Councillor Gaffney.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to ask, in the report, it talks about $327 cost, and then we've got our cost here of $790. Does that include the, is that because that's the parking spot encroachment and the other cement parts? Is it all together? Is that why we come up with the $790.96?
Ms. Defoe, go ahead.
So through the chair, yes, that's correct. When the report was prepared, the single car parking space was not recommended as part of the encroachment agreement. However, following the subcommittee recommendation to include it, those numbers were revised.
Councillor Bunting and then Councillor Gaffney.
Yes, I was wondering if it's possible for us to decide on the parking piece and see what staff, because the manager's not here, and the argument that the gentleman had presented to us with respect to the timing of things and so on and so forth, and the way he saw it, would it be possible to sort of put that off for another date, for another discussion, or do these things have to be kept together tonight? Would it be possible to split them, as it were?
I see Ms. Thompson. Did you want to add something for that?
So if I understand correctly, you're wanting to deal with the parking encroachment tonight and to then defer the remainder of the recommendation. I would suggest with respect that perhaps we leave it all together in case that one impacts the other, so that if you wanted to defer this to the 2 weeks time for the next council meeting or the next Planning and Heritage Committee meeting, that it be dealt with in its entirety would be my recommendation.
And I was just going to follow up in a way that some of the comments from Mr. Lemon were around the agreement, the encroachment agreement. And I would say that what we're looking for here is to have this encroachment agreement be the same as others, that we have consistent policy and consistent agreement and consistent language in those agreements as we would with any other encroachment. So I'm not sure that separating them addresses those questions necessarily. Although, mind you, you're welcome to make your motion and see if you can get a seconder. I had Councillor Gaffney and then Councillor Henderson.
Madam Chair, I'm gonna move the subcommittee recommendation, please.
Could I get a seconder for that? Councillor Ingram. And before I call the question, I saw Councillor Henderson, your hand was up, and then Councillor Burback.
Yes, I just want to say, like, in my time that I've been on council, I know lots of surprises have happened. People are, doing something. I remember one was downtown and it was like a sign was out too far and it was encroaching. So they either could change the sign or they instead paid the fee. And, people have been doing something around their home or different things, and they found out that that part was encroaching. So, over the last, I've been on since 2006, we've been moving it like that. And I know it's a shock to people because they don't realize it. Because, truthfully, how many people read all the bylaws and everything before they decide to build things or do things, which they're supposed to do. But sometimes they don't, and then they go to do something else, and then they find out they built it too far out, that they were encroaching. Because, lots of people don't even know where their property line ends, and then the city begins. So when you are encroaching, some people do, but not everybody. So it can happen, and it's unfortunate. And then the fee was has been set so that everybody's treated equally. I know it's still hard, but that's just what's happened in the past.
Thank you. Councillor Burback?
Thank you. Yeah, I support this motion. I was wondering about the other point that Mr. Lemon raised about there was an end date to this agreement, and I'm assuming that that's a standard encroachment agreement that would have an end date. Am I assuming correctly about that?
I believe it's a termination clause, not an end date, but the city.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Foe can clarify, or sorry, Ms. Thompson, I see you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So the question of the termination date has come up before. It is strongly recommended that there must be a termination date on either party. The city requires the ability to terminate any agreement, and previous legal advice obtained on this is that the city not or ensure that there is a termination date clause within these encroachment agreements that is to the benefit of the city. I can say that it is rare for the city to exercise its need to terminate an encroachment agreement. But however, based on previous legal advice, we strongly recommend that council keep any termination date within any of these types of encroachment agreements.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. That helps.
And I would add also that if somebody who has an encroachment agreement with the city removes that encroachment, they can actually terminate the agreement and stop paying the extra money as well. So those termination agreements benefit the city, but they can also benefit the people that are paying the encroachment fee. So are there any other, Councillor Seven, please go ahead, and then I'm going to call the question.
Thank you. So I'm just, well, now I'm curious about well, so in this particular case, the encroachment is for a retaining wall and sort of a ramp, and so I'm just wondering, it seems to me, I'm getting the impression anyway that at some point this was approved as part of it, and the documentation, we just don't have it, and I'm just wondering, in this case, if the encroachment were terminated or didn't exist, then it would really hamper the sort of functionality of the way things are there now. And so I guess I'm troubled with the approval of the encroachment and charging for it. I support the motion. I'm just not sure about the fee, and I guess we'll have time to sort of find more information when this comes back to regular council. Can I just clarify, this is not coming back for reconvene?
Mr. Foe, I don't think it, go ahead.
So through the chair, it is not scheduled on reconvene council. It would come back to the February 28th council meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, I'll call the question. All in favor of the subcommittee recommendation? Opposed, if any? One opposed, and that's carried, or a couple opposed, and that's carried. So moving on, item number 7 is just for information of the committee, and the last item is motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ingram, seconded by Councillor Burback. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Vasilakos. I'll call the council meeting back to order and we'll reconvene, and I'll turn it over to the clerk.
Through your worship, item 15.2.1, or sorry, 15.1 is declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations made at standing committee to be restated at the reconvene portion?
Seeing none.
The final item is 15.2, reading of the bylaws, and there is one bylaw listed, and that's the confirmatory bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Seven and Councillor Henderson that the confirmatory bylaw 11.5 be read a first and second time. All those in favor? Opposed to any? That's carried. 11.5 to be read a third and final time this evening. Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Bunting. Discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed to any? And that's carried. And a motion to adjourn this evening's proceedings. Councillor Clifford and Councillor Ingram. All those in favor? Opposed to any? And that's carried. Good evening, everyone. Thank you.